Well, this is kind of a mini art haul. Excuse the acrylic drying. If any of you have watched or are going to watch my acrylic tutorial, you'll know that's part of it. Whilst in that tutorial I did a kind of, oh, I'm going to let this dry now and come back later. This is what I do when things are drying. I do another video because I film my videos on block. A little mini haul, I just got some Perylene Violet because it was £2 instead of like 5 or 6 in my local art store, and what they also had was this Simply Natural Hair brush zip case of paints, of brushes. Now, I bought the Simply Gold Tacklon equivalent, which is where this came from, where you get exactly the same brushes in gold Tacklon for acrylic about 6 months ago, and I love them. They're great brushes for acrylic. They're really cheap. They do the job. And you know, there's the next one. There's the 3/4 inch flat wash next to it, and they're great. I really like them. This is their watercolor equivalent, so it's designed to be good for watercolor, okay for oil, and bad for acrylic. That's what they say in their own ratings. It's 25% off, so instead of being £10.95, it was £8.21. So you're looking at here, you're getting 10 brushes for 80p each, or £1 10p normally. Not expecting miracles. Now, I'm really funny about watercolor brushes. I'll buy absolute shit for acrylic. Oil, I don't paint, but I have a few oil brushes and I buy decent ones. I mean, even the oil brushes that I use for watercolor are, this is a Georgian watercolor from DNR, so it's their professional oil range, but I'm using it for watercolor. That's how kind of fussy I am. Watercolor, I'm pretty fussy, but these might be good for a beginner. I don't know. I haven't been able to test them out myself, so I thought I would try them out because I know a lot of you watching the Spin Doctor's Surgery are after a good solution to needing a number of brushes at once. Now, in those videos, I've recommended people buy certain number of Simply Simmons, aka Graduate from Daler and Rowney, these brushes, because they're great. They're really cheap. This range is kind of a bit worse in quality generally than those. They're slightly better in quality, but actually this might be a good solution. It might not be. That's the point of reviewing it, is to find out which it is. So as with the other ones I got, it comes in this case that's actually pretty useful. It folds in half, like a clamshell case, and it holds the brushes. I actually don't use these kind of cases because whenever do you carry brushes around, really? You want a proper brush case. I use them to carry pencils when I'm painting on plein air. So, you know, the case is like a nice little freebie. Let's go through what it contains. There's a size 0, 2, 4 and 6 round. There is a 6 filbert, a 4 and a 10 flat shader, a 1-inch Skyflow, a 3/4 inch oval wash and a 3/4 inch flat wash. So that's exactly the same as in the previous one that I had. So I will go through them and talk about my views on them. It does not say exactly what they're made out of, but looking at it, I think it's a horsehair synthetic blend. It's not entirely easy to see. It says natural hair, and that's all it tells us. So I don't know what they are, and obviously that's a bad thing, because some people will not use sable. Some people will not use hog because they don't like the way pigs are treated in captivity. And to be honest, if you've ever seen how swine are farmed and slaughtered, you might not want to buy hog bristle that's from countries like China. Personally, I have a friend who's an animal welfare expert, and that's his job, and as an academic, and he will not eat pork that is not bred and slaughtered in the UK, because some of the practices, even in Europe, even in Denmark, are very different to how we do it, and he's very passionate about that, and I trust his views. So I feel really bad when I buy hog bristle brushes because I know the hog hair is from China, where the slaughtering techniques may not be great. Horsehair can be taken from a horse that's still alive, so I don't really worry quite so much about it. But I do think it's pretty bad that Daler and Rowney are not saying what they're using. And to use a god-awful phrase I hear all the time on YouTube, I'm going to reach out to Daler and Rowney. In other words, I'm going to send them an email, and I'm going to find out what these are made of, and I'll put it in the description once I know. And they do say they're 100% wood from well-managed forests, whatever well-managed means, but at least they're FSC rated for wood, so that's one thing. I'll just take out the flat wash, which is 3/4 inch, and I'll just compare it with its acrylic cousin. The acrylic gold Taclon version is here. It's a bit stained because I used it with phthalo green. And here's this one. This one's still got sizing on it, so they look a bit different. They're exactly the same. There's no difference between these, just the fibre. And that's good because I know they're well made. These smell... they smell like old books. I think it's the sizing that's on them. And I'm just trying to break that sizing down with my fingers a little bit because I haven't got any water on standby. I think they're horsehair. If I look at a pony synthetic like this, so this is a horsehair Taclon blend, you can tell it's a Taclon blend because if you bend it in the light, you've got the yellow fibres there. This looks very similar, very shiny like horsehair, but it doesn't look like it's got the Taclon. So these look like they might be natural horsehair, which is no, horsehair is not a bad fibre for a beginner watercolourist. Can take on a lot of water. What I would say about these is before use, you may want to wash them with baby shampoo because horsehair can be a little bit greasy and that might help with it. The only difference really that I can really tell between them and their acrylic cousins is that the gold Taclon ones actually feel heavier. The actual brushes feel heavier. I don't know whether these are made of a lighter wood because they're painted, so I don't know what they're made of. Whereas the gold Taclon ones, you can see the wood and they appear to be quite robust. So they feel to me very light for what they are, and that can make them hard to paint with. So the 1/2 inch oval wash is a little bit splayed, but you know, that's an oval wash for you. It's not meant to give you lovely straight lines. That's green acrylic I've got on my fingers, by the way, not ectoplasm. Seems all right, you know, it's a bit bushy, but I think if I wash them, they kind of tighten up. The 1 inch Skyflow, which it says Skyflow on the pack, and it is definitely a Skyflow brush. It says flat actually on it, but it is a Skyflow. Now this appears to be a different fibre, and I think that's synthetic. It's so shiny and so soft. It does not look like horsehair at all, and it's got hair of uneven length. So if you take the end of the brush, there's a lot of hairs in here that are not the full length. If you can see that, there's a lot of hair in there that's broken off, that's not full length hair. That does not feel like horsehair. Now it's labelled as a natural hair brush. So it surprises me that that would be 100% synthetic. I mean, now that might have 20% sable mixed in with it, or 20% squirrel. It's got black hairs in there, and I would not be surprised if they are a small number of hairs of squirrel mixed into gold Taclon. It feels like synthetic. It's very soft, but I will ask Daler and Rowney to tell me what it is, because I just don't believe that that's a natural brush. Compare this horsehair here with this. I mean, it's very different. If we put a squirrel, we find a squirrel in my brushes. It could have goat in it, I suppose, but it doesn't feel like goat. This is a genuine squirrel, and you can kind of see what texture squirrel is. It's almost a little wiry in places, and that reminds me of the black fibres in there. So I'm going to ask DNR to tell me exactly what that is. There is what they call a flat shader, which is a flat to anyone else. It's actually probably a 1-stroke, really. That looks like it's made of something a bit darker. I don't know. That's softer. That's probably not horsehair. That could well be a very cheap, really shitty sable. Literally shitty, because it's often from the back end of the animal and is urine stained and things, so it's not always the best thing. The 8 round feels like a sable. It's just a very cheap sable. You can see on the side, can you see there that there's bits that are too short? And what would not surprise me is if when they manufacture these, that they make brush heads for better quality brushes, and if they just don't meet the quality they want because they've got broken bits, that they will use the hair for something else. So don't think they're necessarily bad. That's got horsehair in it. I think that's pony and maybe sable blended. Don't think there's any synthetic in that one. There's another flat shader, size 4, just knocking the sizing off. Again, I think that's the same as the other one. You know, you're not going to get great quality hair for 80p a brush. I won't open all of them. I will take out the size 2 round because it's quite a long brush. Again, it kind of looks like sable, but I doubt it. What I'm going to do is just paint a really quick swatch on this bit of Bockingford that I have lying around, because just happened to have a piece of Bockingford there from... I'm terrible. If I'm clearing out, I won't throw anything. So I used that to test out an embossing powder technique months ago when I was talking to Wendy Vecchi on Twitter. And she told me a technique that she'd been trying to get right. So I started trying to play with it myself. And I couldn't get there either. Neither of us could get it to look quite how in our heads it was going to look. So I'm just trying to find a palette that's nearby, because I've moved everything because I'm painting acrylic, and when I paint acrylic I move all my watercolour stuff. Let's have a look up here. No, there's none up there. Well, that's rather annoying, isn't it? Okay, I've got some Van Dyke Brown quite nearby that I can reach. I'm going to do it using some water that I've got here in a little squirty bottle. I can use that. It's so professional. I'm going to paint some Van Dyke Brown, so that's a dye-based colour, and I'm using the 8 round. I'm lifting it off of a palette where the paint is dried down. Okay, so it lifts a decent amount of colour. It doesn't hold a lot of water though. Or maybe it does. Okay, once it's been wetted, it holds a reasonable amount. I'm not unhappy with that. Clean's okay. One of the problems with horsehair is often it doesn't clean very well. So I'm quite pleased that that's cleaned reasonably well. Let's try the 3/4 inch flat. I'm going to pick up Sanguine Red, which is one of those limited edition colours from Winsor & Newton. These are all Winsor & Newton paints, by the way. Okay, so the brush is very stiff, which is a sign of horsehair, really. But it picks up a reasonable amount of colour, holds a decent amount of water, and the stiffness does give you quite good control. I think once the sizing is fully washed off, that could actually be quite nice. So that's not a terrible brush. I'm not disappointed with these. I think these are actually, for the price, they're actually pretty good quality. I just want to know what they are. Now the 1 inch flat. And I'm going to pick up some Phthalo Turquoise. Ooh, that picked up very easily. So let's get that into the window. Now, that did kind of squish up a little bit when I did that, but it's picked that up pretty well. You know, that's not been difficult to lift at all. The brush lifted the paint really easily. It's holding enough water to paint a reasonably large area. I mean, what else could you want from a Skyflow brush that's 80p? I'm actually pretty impressed with that, to be really honest with you. For the price, you know, that's really not a bad brush. What are we complaining about? I want to know what these fibres are. Really, I mean that. I really do want to know what they are. It bothers me that I don't know what they are. So, you know, you can get a good coverage with that. That was not much paint. You know, really very little paint there. I'm not very unhappy there at all. They are as good as the acrylic ones are for acrylic. These are good for watercolour. So let's be very honest here. For cheap brushes, these are not a bad set. I don't think they're bad at all. I would recommend these to an absolute beginner who needs something to get started with. I think a better painter might be able to do better. I'm now doing the 3/4 inch oval wash. I need to find some paper to paint it onto because I don't have it. I'll paint on the back of this. I'm doing some stuff for an art journal, so I've got some space. Actually, I'll paint on the edge of this, then I won't ruin the back of anything. So this is cerulean blue red shade, so it's kind of like a less neutral cerulean blue. That doesn't lift the paint quite so well. I had to work that one a little bit more and the brush kind of squished up. So I don't like that one. No, I don't like that one very much. That one's a bit crap. That's the one that looked very fluffy, like very cheap goat or horse mix maybe. No, I didn't like that one. Let's try one of those small ones that look like it might have been a different blend, because some of the small ones did look really very different. I'm picking up this time Pyrrol Orange. Wonderfully vivid colour, and we'll paint that onto the edge there. See, that's pretty good. That paints really well. You know, it's holding enough paint. I don't know what it would be like for lifting. It's shedding hair, little hair shed there. But that's not the end of the world, you know, one shed hair. And I haven't washed these, and I should wash brushes before I use them, but I haven't. So, considering I have not washed them, what have I got to complain about? Normally you would wash brushes with cold water and baby shampoo or cheap soap or something like that first, as that will really help with things. I'm just going to do, how many have I tested now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have another brush here I have not yet tested clearly. Ah, here it is. The size 10 flat shader, which is a one stroke really. Let's just get a bit of water on that. And I've noticed when I put them in the water, they are a little hydrophobic, and the water is going very turbid. So there is clearly a lot of sizing on these brushes that you really have got to wash off to get decent results. And I will be putting on now some more of that sanguine red, bearing in mind it's had a chance to wet now, so the paint came off really easily. And just look at that. I mean, it's picked up a good amount of colour. It's held its own pretty well. That's a dye-based paint, sanguine red. It uses really obscure red pigment. The only thing I would say is that as the brush dries out, it's curving. It's holding its shape because it's very stiff fibre. It doesn't really behave as a watercolour brush should not be doing that to me. So I go across and it doesn't return, it has no spring, it's not returning to its original shape. So that's one downside. They don't return to their original shape when they are wet, but that means you'll need to reshape them when you dry them so that they don't bend. I think for an absolute beginner, this set is fine. It really is fine. I'm actually going to go back in time to my Spin Doctor's surgery videos, and I'm actually going to add a recommendation for this as an annotation to those videos, because it's actually surprised me how good quality this is. So really, if you're an absolute beginner and you want a set, the Daler and Rowney Simply Natural Hair set with the blue handles are really, really good for a beginner watercolorist. And I've been using the acrylic ones myself, and I'm far from a beginner acrylicist. I've been using these for months, and I actually virtually only use Simply Gold Tacklon for acrylic, because it doesn't matter if you ruin them. They're really cheap. They're pretty good quality. I've never had a bad brush. I've never had anything shed. I mix them for acrylic with Kryler when I need a really stiff brush for heavy body paint. I use Kryler, which are professional. So even I do a lot of acrylic. I sell my acrylics. I use a really cheap brush for acrylic. I buy the cheapest brush money can buy, really, but I mix them with one of the most expensive money can buy. With watercolour, I'm much more fussy. With watercolour, I need a really, really good fibre that does exactly what I want it to do. But with acrylic, you know, you can kind of make do. So I would say even for a beginner, I think you'll reach a stage where you may get frustrated with these. Once you get better, you may find as you get better that you grow out of these brushes and you kind of need some better ones. But I'm actually going to keep these, and I'm going to chop them down a little bit, and I'm going to use them for when you need a stippling brush or a lifting brush or a brush with weird edges or something like that, or when I don't want to ruin a good brush using a new technique. And sometimes I want to use watercolour brushes with acrylic for certain effects. I'm going to keep them for those. So I'm going to keep them as a set that I'm probably going to absolutely destroy. But hey, they were 80p each. What can I complain about? They were a really, really good price. So My recommendation is total beginner, yes. Someone who wants a cheap set they can really screw with and do other stuff with and not worry about them, absolutely yes. Intermediate painters will reach a stage where you feel they're frustrating and you want something better. That's actually good because it shows that you've improved and you'll know when that stage comes. But I cannot recommend them more for the total beginner. From the basics that I've just tried with them, I think they're absolutely fine and really good value. Thank you all very much. And if you want to buy them, affiliate links down in the product in the video description. You can buy them from those. They won't cost you any more than if you went on Amazon or wherever and looked for the links yourself. But I do get a small commission and I reinvest all of that in the running of this channel. I'm not taking personal profits at the moment. I'm using it to kind of keep this channel going. Thank you all very much and good evening.